Hey everyone, welcome to the IndieSky Working Group number 002. We're going to be talking about PDS hosting today. And my name is Boris Mann, and I help run the AT Community Fund, which is hosting the IndieSky Working Group. Other than PDS hosting, we actually have a bunch of other topics, and we've spawned a bunch of other working groups. So I think at the very least, what we'll do is we'll make sure that everyone who wants to form new working groups and tell people what we're talking about, we'll ask you just to say a bit about it, share any links, and we'll get that recorded and make sure that people can find you after the event. Um, so where are we going to get here? We've got some extra questions here. This is great. Um, we have gone into this topic. Go ahead, Ted.
One quick shout out, if you haven't been on the call before, please feel free to drop in the notes. Tell us a little bit about yourself. I'm Ted Hahn. I'm also working on the ATProto community fund.
Thanks, Ted. Yeah, we're not going to do a big round of intros this time, but I want to make sure we see the main faces. And the first time you speak, we'll actually ask you to introduce yourself as well. Um, we covered this topic at the Ahoy Conf when we had an IndieSky Day and went through PDS hosting in a pretty detailed way. So I'm going to actually ask Lorenz to kind of talk a little bit about that process. And he came up with these list of questions for what an independent PDS hosting org might want to answer. I think the other thing that we sort of figured out that there's maybe three categories of PDSs aside from um, I like to self-host on a because it's fun. What does it mean to like run something as a group and run something professionally? And I think there's roughly three categories. One, PDS for jurisdictions, which just really is a fancy way of saying I really want my data in Canada or Europe or Australia or wherever you like. Two, PDS for communities of interest. I say communities of interest, which is kind of a broader term than just the narrow one of community. And I think the other thing that we very specifically surfaced was that there seemed to be an upwelling of interest from academic communities in particular, saying, now is a time that maybe we should have more sovereignty over our data. And then finally, PDS for app devs, where our hypothesis right now is that bundling PDS hosting with an app that you run, especially for sign up, gives smooth sign up, and kind of has a combined um, offering that you have, and obviously you're running your own dependencies at that point as well. Other than those three, are there other ones that we can think of that might be a broad category? Awesome. Um, no real like importance necessarily. It's just sometimes can be helpful as part of the why someone might be running. Enrico says Congress PDS. Yeah, I think maybe that fits into jurisdiction, probably not quite community of interest. We've gone back and forth on, should governments run this stuff? Maybe for their own communication services and accounts, and obviously on Blue Sky, you've got a bunch of Congress and Senate handles. Um, it is, there's a split here among Europe and North America, but a lot of people get uncomfortable with many people, with governments running the social communications layers. Brian, go
Yeah.
ahead.
At least something I've conceived of, but it hasn't really come out to play this way. But there's kind of like high assurance as one. So that's, most PDS hosting right now, you don't have that type of like an SLA. Like you can't really get someone if something's gone wrong with your account, you can't get someone on the phone. And so if you're really professional, like you're like full time, your job is being on the internet, or you're running a service like these Japanese tsunami warning things where it's like the message getting out is quite important, or something like a celebrity or a public figure, and you want more. There's like this can touch on these kind of like moderation sovereignty things. Like you don't want someone else to be able to take your account down, but it might just be like you really want your account to stay online so you can send messages out in a way that doesn't is like more important or more you're willing to spend resources on differently than just like a regular microblogging um, kind of person. Then you might want to run your own or have someone else run it for you in a way that you're like paying extra to get that like higher assurance of hosting.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point from the perspective of we've kept out kind of business models. I think there's a definitely managed hosting in there and various of them. And especially with how relatively cheap on a per user account basis. Brian, I think you guys have something like 300K accounts per server or something like that, right? And Jazz did some interesting numbers on what that would look like. Yeah, awesome. Anything else on the like types of categories that we might want to cover? Yes, Enrico. So really the Enrico says public data stores. Really, that's the whole concept of lexicons. So anything that has to be publicly stored would be something that's a great fit that would be published across many different PDSs. Yeah. Um, let me hand it to Lorenz, who is going to go over the kind of questions to ask yourself as an organization that is looking to do PDS hosting. Lorenz,
Yes.
can you introduce yourself?
Yes, thanks, Boris. I'm Lawrence or Laurens, whatever pronunciation you want to go for. I write Fediverse Report. It's a weekly newsletter on everything ATProto, as well as Fediverse, as well as like the whole open social web thing. So if you want to stay in the loop on what's happening, you know where to find me. I was also one of the co-organizers for the Ahoy conferences a few weeks ago, and then Boris held the second session, and I made some notes during that session on like IndieSky, what do we actually want from a working group, what does that look like, and like there's just a lot of information and a lot of people wanting to go into different directions. So during that meeting, I decided to like just write down some of my notes, some of my questions, and some of my thoughts of like, hey, what do you actually, if you want to do PDS hosting, if you want to offer that as a service for whatever reason, Boris already mentioned some of the different reasons, like what do you actually need to answer? Because I feel like a way to get this working group forward is to realize like, hey, there's multiple people interested in offering some sort of PDS hosting, and there's going to be like some sort of overlap in questions that you're going to answer and some sort of answers as well. So we need somewhere to structure of like, okay, what exactly are we talking about? So that's what I try to make use of. And if somebody could like show the notes on the screen, then I can
Oh, sure.
go through them.
Happy to do
I'll
that.
do
Give
that,
me
Ted,
what...
and then you could type down below,
Gotcha.
and I'll do this version. There we go.
Right. Perfect. I split it up into a few different categories, and for me, the hope of this meeting specifically is that we get not necessarily the answers, but we get a more answers on what are the good questions to ask. Like if you're an organization or a person that's interested in potentially offering PDS hosting, like my hope for this meeting is not that you're going to have the answers to these questions at the end of the meeting, but that you have a relatively solid list of like, hey, this is the stuff that I need to consider. So what we're seeing now here on the screen is like a first push towards it, but I'm sure there's a significant number of questions missing or could be formulated better, or like I'm sure you all have thoughts on that. I split it up into like organization, which is gonna come back to a whole lot of like the split that Boris already made earlier of like why are you offering PDS hosting? Is this for like, I don't know, just high availability, like Brian offered, or just for fun, or for developer, or for jurisdiction purposes, etc., etc. So first few questions like just really about the organization, but I'm sure for the more organizational experienced people, we can get like better questions and more precise questions on that. Quick related to that is question of community and like who's your target audience? Who do you actually want to sign up for the PDS, which is again very much related to the point of like why are we doing this? And then we get a little bit more into the technical questions of like there's multiple software options for PDS hosting availability at this point. Like you can go with the official BlueSky one, you can go to RSky or Whiskey, as Rudy apparently pronounced it, or I don't know, you can guess you built your own. And then we get to the second point, which is moderation and moderation software. At this point in time, my understanding is as somebody who actually has not run a PDS, it's kind of impossible to do it without Ozone, as in you need a way to take down content. If you like if you host other people's content, like it's sort of impossible to not do that. And I think the only tool available currently that does that is Ozone, but maybe something else is available as well. And then you really get to the question of like, okay, we have a tool, but also we probably need more tools for automated moderation, handling to CSAM scanning, and all other fun stuff. Then you get to the DMCA request. How do you handle that? Then you get to the fun stuff that I'm not really sure BlueSky necessarily handles super well, considering like some person did manage to use use a specific program to upload a B movie to ATProto to BlueSky. I think a BlueSky lexicon ATProto, but BlueSky lexicon PDS. I'm sorry, too many different terms. But and again, like how do you make the guidelines on like how do you deal with political takedown requests? I recently wrote an article on like what BlueSky does with moderation stuff. Like this, BlueSky is when it comes to like requests from the Turkish government to take down content. Like BlueSky is a big enough network that big political actors like government level are interested in what's happening. So if you're gonna take this seriously, at some point, be prepared for the possibility for like how do you deal with takedown requests that might just be political in nature, or maybe like that's falls outside of your scope. But that's sort of like the first direction that I think should help guide the conversation of like what the questions that you need to answer if you're an organization. Like what type of organization are you? What's your target audience? How are you going to approach it technically? And how are you going to approach the hotbed question of moderation? So that's my introduction. And I think already there's questions. But
Go ahead, Roscoe.
Chris, you were already raising your hand, or like can we go to Roscoe already?
Just a clarification. I believe the Turkish takedown was at the app view level, not the PDS level, because it was just blocked in Turkey, not in any other regions. So the content was still on the PDS. It was just not shown in the app view.
Yeah, that's very. Oh well, we already have the context for from Brian as well. But yeah, that's how they solved it. But which is a pretty nice and sweet solution. But I think like if you're gonna if you are an organization that that offers PDS hosting, you do not have to follow the way that the BlueSky PBC used it. Like this is something that if you're an organization, you have to decide this for yourself. Like, are we gonna appeal like with takedown request, or are we gonna just push this towards the geo moderation labeler problem?
Well, ultimately, a PDS won't be a PDS label. It won't be a geo label at all. I think this is one of those super nuanced areas, and I know Sebastian and I had a back and forth around PDSs, which actually host data, and relays, and I was arguing for relay as essentially a cache. because that's like not really where stuff lives. You don't really take stuff down from the relay, um, other than certain things. And I think that this is the
Let's
number thing. The thing that we've heard that people are concerned about is that, and I think we definitely need to do a session, maybe the next one led by Ted, on trust and safety, and very specifically ozone hosting. Ted, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to call out a couple of things here, right? So this is about the policy framework that you use to both run your app or do hosting, or the way that those are combined, right? And so those responsibilities are separate, and Blue Sky has a coherent sort of notion of that, but that's going to depend on the type of takedown, the type of content, and also the way that your like app is configured too. Because it's worth noting that, for example, like the Deer.social folks could still access, or Turkish users could access that content, which is like in like people's understanding of this and government's understanding of this is going to evolve over time. So that's just another thing that we're going to want to consider and think about over the long term.
Yeah.
Back to you, Lorenz.
And just generally, we kind of did a speed run, and we've got that all up on the screen right now of those things. Other questions, open questions that you have as people considering this, concerns, which of these things are top of mind for you? Go ahead, Roscoe.
Do we think as government's understanding of these technologies evolves, they will start demanding more aggressive moderation? Like once they understand where the infrastructure is, they will stop asking Blue Sky to take it down at the app level and start asking whoever the PDS host is to take it down at the infrastructure level?
They may. So running Document Cloud, that was certainly a thing that we saw happen, which was there were people, and this happens in a lot of situations. People go to your upstream provider and say, "Hey, this thing should be taken down," and then it's up to your hosting provider's incentives too. So we were hosting on Amazon. Occasionally, we would get messages from Amazon saying, "We're not happy that we're getting letters about the thing that you're doing."
I'd say one thing to think about is that there's a ton of precedent around plain website hosting. And I wonder how having that split out into the PDS host may be helpful to explain to different entities. Go ahead, Brian.
You're muted.
Around that specific point, there's definitely some intentional weirdness around a couple of things. Like one I would point out is like the PDS doesn't, or our PDS and in general, the PDS makes it hard to view content from a browser directly from the PDS. And that's somewhat intentional. Like it'd be really fun. Like we could put PDS LS on the PDS. That just kind of draws attention to the PDS as a piece of infrastructure that's serving content to end users. Whereas things are right now where you have an app, that's like clearly where users are accessing content. And so that's what directs these kind of governmental or regulatory attention. And we want to draw that on apps more than on the infrastructure. The infrastructure is there. You can do it. Like we're not lying, right? Like you can use curl to download images from the PDS, and there's something a little scary about that. But we're like, there is an intentional bit of a like trying to jingle the keys over here and keep the keys jingling next to the branded apps, like things like Deer.social or BSky as the like locus. Like this is where the real moderation is happening. This is where like most decisions are being made, is there, not at the infrastructure layer. This wasn't the main reason to do this, but this is also like the PDS or the relay as it's currently conceived it kind of caches things for this like backfill window, but it's not serving up entire things, which also reduces the pressure on relay operators to be interventionist on stuff. You still got to do it on the PDS. We've really, we've muddied the water by being a PDS operator and an app operator. And the way we've done moderation is like often when we take something down from one, we just take it down everywhere because that's just like the simple, expedient thing to do. But you totally can separate all these out. And there are cases that are starting to crop up where there's like content on a PDS that hasn't been taken down. But we do take down at the app view, either with labeling or on the app view infrastructure itself. I would, just to like slip it in there, we've done extremely little infrastructure moderation. Like it just kind of hasn't come up to a surprising degree. I don't think we like, I don't know if we've published this publicly. I think we've taken down one PDS ever and like 1 or 2 accounts at the relay ever. And they were just, you know, it was like 50,000 events per second or something. It was like a network abuse thing. It just hasn't been a thing in some sense. I'm sure it'll become more of a thing over time. But it hasn't been, there hasn't been a big blow up in the network of like, why is this account not accessible? And it comes down to an infrastructure reason. But I'm sure it'll happen. And so some more of this, these kind of thought experiments, I think will start to play out more.
Yeah, that's a good point, and it raises a question. I had this. I had assumed that the PDS ban list was longer.
Nope.
Great.
I mean, I don't know. Like, I don't even remember what it was. I think it's gone, right? Like they gave up and they're gone. It's a very important. We've had it from the very first day the relay existed. We've had the capability to do it, but we haven't done it. I also just wanted to touch on 1 or 2 other things that came up. Lorenz, you mentioned using Ozone to moderate a PDS. That's something we want to work, and it sort of works, but I think it actually probably doesn't work out of the box today. In fact, like basically the only tool you have out of the box today for moderating a PDS is the PDS admin tool or the API. And what the API lets you do, I put this in chat, but the 2 things, the kind of decision we went with, which I guess other people could try to do this differently, is that you can do entire accounts on the PDS. So you can take down an entire account or bring it back, or like suspend it for a period of time or bring it back, or things like that. But you can't take down individual posts. It just kind of breaks the protocol in a funny way. Labeling is really the tool for moderating individual posts and works well for that. Trying to like say only a subset of a repository can be passed around just gets very weird. It's possible the protocol could evolve to handle that kind of thing better. But as things are today, everything gets all jammed up if you try to remove individual posts. The thing you can do that are scary are blobs. So you can do blob takedowns as an admin on a PDS. So you can say a single, and it's a single blob at a time for a single account, and it redacts it. And that everything kind of basically works across the protocol, where like you can't always assume the blob is, the blob is referenced from the repository, but it's kind of like not in the repository. Anyway, okay. That was a bunch of points, and there's a whole queue.
That's great. No. I mean,
Yeah.
the knowledge share is awesome, and we're like, the whole point that this exists is to try and pull it out of the institutional knowledge that's in GitHub issues and Discords into something that we can build on. So I really appreciate that, Brian. Roscoe, go ahead.
I'm pretty sure PDS moderation does work out of the box in Ozone. At least like from what I've used, it seems like you can just set a few environment variables in the PDS and on Ozone, and PDS takedowns work pretty well. The area I'd say needs a lot of work is distinction. If you have an app view connected and you can do takedowns at the app view level, and a PDS connected to Ozone and you can do PDS takedowns, there's really only one takedown button. And I'm pretty sure, as far as I know, it takes down everything it has available. So I don't know exactly how you would do takedowns at one level and not the other if you have both connected. But I assume for a PDS host that's just doing PDS hosting, you would probably just have the PDS connected to do takedowns.
I'll just jump to reply. Yeah, it's just missing work. I think there's a proposal floating around somewhere, and being able to do individual infrastructure actions from Ozone on individual pieces is just, we just haven't kind of gotten to it. Someone else, the APIs are there, so it's kind of possible, but it's like the UI and like the whole system just doesn't make it easy right now.
Great. And that also just points to a very, very like there's a concrete task that we need to um, um, figure out what we need to do from an engineering perspective and work together on getting it done. Jordan, please go ahead.
Hello, good to meet you all. I'm Jon. I'm new here. I work with Sebastian on some fun stuff. I'm not trying to push this like too much into the nitty-gritty, but like just from a compliance perspective, when you look at Europe as a whole, and I'm deliberately now excluding the US because I don't know a lot about it, like from the policy perspective. But just for Europe, so European level, member state level, I don't think there is really a chance that you can get away with just hard and soft moderation on the app layers or on the app views. I understand that this is a preferred architecture and this is like what is currently the best way to do it. But just from the compliance perspective, you will need to be able to, first of all, react to stuff that comes from other jurisdictions. So let's say some law applies for viewers or people in the France jurisdiction interfacing with some content from a PDS in Germany. Then you will need to deal with the actual host jurisdiction. So that could be different stuff. NetzDG, for instance, in Germany is not a thing in France. You will need to be able to moderate, so put labels on it. You will need to be able to react with this moderation labels in a way that it's not visible. So kind of a soft delete. But for some stuff, and of course, CSAM is a canonical example, but there are others like right to be forgotten, right for correction of PII under BDSG NOI, which is like an extension on DSGV or GDPR. So there are, you will always need to be able to really hard delete content. And you will need to differentiate between where you're hosted and where your visitors are coming from. This sounds now like pretty dramatic. And as Brian mentioned in the call we had, we really need to be careful not to overshoot here, because it's just because this is kind of what we should be able to do. It does not necessarily mean that this is something we would be forced to do, right? But I'm just saying that when you just look at the compliance landscape, ignoring hard deletes on the PDS level and also stuff like complaints about moderation decision is probably not going to work, at least not at scale, if you want to reach scale.
So I disagree in part
that's good.
because what you're describing is a bundling that is not how an ATProto application works. So let's walk through it very, very briefly. You are a PDS host for football fans in Europe. And your servers are in Italy. And your users can sign into any application, but the majority of them actually just use BlueSky. As a host of their data, you just host their data. And the content is accessed through BlueSky, and you actually just offloaded the bulk of your moderation to BlueSky. And by bulk, I mean like 99%. That's how I would view it. I am not a lawyer, yada, yada, yada. I think that if you are an app developer who are hosting your own, and even there, it gets complicated. But let's say you are a combined PDS host and app developer. I think most of those requests are going to be coming in at the app developer layer.
Yeah, I have the feeling that getting the nitty-gritty of this discussion will completely blow up around. So the question is a little bit, how can maybe one or two interested people contribute asynchronously feedback to this whole thing? Because one of my problems when engaging in this discussion is that I don't know the English technical terms. Maybe they don't really exist. So I can just talk a bunch of Ja, aber das ist vermutlich nicht hilfreich. That's probably not going to be helpful for the latter round. So
Well, I'd say two things. I think collecting questions for us to discuss next time would be great. And there are a couple of things, right? There's the logical distinction, the sort of physical distinction for where the data lives. There's the legal and jurisdictional question, right? Like Blue Sky is one entity that's doing two things. Things will get more complicated if you have a PDS hosted somewhere else in an app view that's run by Blue Sky, and then who's receiving the takedowns and so forth, right?
Yeah.
just maybe,
So
just maybe super quickly,
super valid.
Yeah.
without going too technical, I think it's important if there is a desire to have like independent applications, independent development, leveraging ATProto. If this is a desire to enable different kinds of social applications with certain overlap, I think we need to answer the question: how can we innovate in the space of hosting these solutions as an independent developer? So India, so it has something to do with the scope of this group. How can we make this possible when you try to do the right thing and look at the compliance landscape in Europe and just want to die inside because it's so complicated? And I think this needs to be the scoping of this whole thing, right? Not to try to out-lawyer the lawyers, but really to figure out what's a pragmatic approach to build a kind of a safe harbor, a bad and overloaded term, but something like that to really shield like indie innovators from all this compliant bullshit.
So, totally agree. And even there's all of these other layers. So I said app developer. If you just make a client app, what is your responsibility? I would say almost zero. Like the people who make the I'm trying to think the tweet bot Mastodon thing. Ivory.
Phoenix.
They make a client application. It's more complicated than that. What I will say is, Robin, I think there's a whole kind of one of the things we said at the beginning, but we're happy to morph that, is we know that we don't have a lot of, or certainly Ted more so than I from his previous experience running a company in this space. We don't have a lot of bench strength around policy and legal. So I think that's something that we'd want to lean on free our feeds to dig into a little bit more, or a very, very specific use case. So I do want to ask Sebastian to talk about the a Euro moderation thing as well. I think we do have to get super crisp on how the architecture actually works and be comfortable with it. One of the things that Robin and I did previously with IPFS, we actually had a really great sit down with lawyers who work in this space, and we explained how it worked, and they used the technical terms, and then we went back and forth and said, yeah, no, this is a cache, this is a controller, and kind of mapped all of the terms. And then that's not arguing it in a court of law, but at least when we have the discussion, we can be confident that we think these are the bounded responsibilities of someone. Yeah. So, and as Ted said, gathering these sorts of questions is absolutely great. Enabling independent innovation in the space, knowing that you're not going to get screwed, is great. I think that this is not terribly different than many other things that are out there today. Go ahead, Robin.
Yeah, no, just a very quick update on this. We've started speaking to a law firm that specializes in this kind of issue for Europe. It happens to be the same law firm that's representing Blue Sky in Europe. So, but we didn't pick them for that. We picked them because we knew them before, and they're really good. And so we're gonna get some much crisper requirements on this side, and we've already been talking with Sebastian, Jörn, and others. We're going to be meeting again to figure this out. So yeah, that's basically the direction we're heading in, and I'm confident that we'll figure something out pretty soon.
Yeah, and maybe I think this is really good. This is, I think, exactly where a split comes about. I definitely see a PDS for app devs being a case where you're going to need to do a bunch more stuff and you have to think about it. For a narrower PDS thing that looks more like communities of interest and jurisdiction, aka I want my data in Canada, we would like to shrink the responsibilities as much as possible, right? So we can have many more orgs doing solid local data hosting, right? We can't really shrink it any more than the law that exists in our jurisdiction. Absolutely fair, and that needs to be clear. Does that make sense as a splitting of focus? This is me trying to make mini working groups. A couple of thumbs up. We'll keep working through this.
We've already decided to have a working group. Don't worry.
Yeah. Working group. I would actually like to, we've got about 20 minutes left, and we've got a couple of other things here, including some new working groups. I think we've gone over this whole thing. Is there anything else on the general questions for independent PDS hosting, or any of you who are looking at PDS hosting that you're like, I have more questions, I have less questions, I need to learn more about X? For me, that's Ozone or not, and really digging into Brian's. Go ahead, Roscoe.
What does it look like for a PDS to do development? Like, how does a PDS host develop new endpoints and features without making the PDS landscape a mess of different hosts with different kinds of endpoints, and different things are supported on different PDSs and things like that?
Brian.
Yeah, great question.
I mean, a missing piece here is like, what is a PDS? I think there's like a GitHub issue I wrote like more than a year ago, and it's like, what endpoints do you need to implement? I would say BridgieFed kind of threw a wrench into this, because they're like, is BridgieFed a PDS? It's this funny little thing. We totally want to encourage that. Like, BridgieFed is cool, but there's some like it stretches like what it is. I think we need some, this is like an interop question at the end of the day, and like, in some sense, I don't want to be too prescriptive, because it'd be nice to let the ecosystem kind of evolve. We can try to give a clear answer, but like, there's no PDS police that's going to come around and be like, oh, you added a new endpoint, you can't do that, right? Like, that's not ever going to be a thing. I think the pattern that's working to me that would be nice is to have things like these sidecar services and some way of kind of formalizing what that is. Maybe it's like we've talked about, like plugins. That's like, designing a plugin system is super complicated. I don't really want to bite that off right now, but the sidecar thing is pretty clean and nice. So an example of the sidecar thing is Tangled having the knots. And right now you can have the knots be separate, but you could imagine bundling knot hosting along with, and knot hosting that's the term they use for basically a Git hosting service that I think speaks the Git protocol, and it speaks some lexicon. Maybe there's some not with a K, not NOT. Thanks so much.
It speaks enough lexicon to get the SSH keys, is my understanding.
Yeah. So that kind of thing. And so some PDS hosts being like, hey, like, our PDS hosting comes with these 5 sidecars that each speak these other little things. This will definitely be a question when we roll out private state. We'll almost certainly have a lot of PDS things that you need. That might be one of these kind of like straining points for like, what is BridgieFed? I would, maybe BridgieFed won't have the private state. Maybe it will. If it can, great. But like, if it just gets too complicated, it's like, oh, this one, then it becomes kind of like, oh, this is only the sync hosting, but not the private state. And then again, the same thing with end-to-end encrypted DMs. Like, some PDSs might implement the routing for that, and some might not. And so some way of kind of like indicating which of these are. I'm kind of guessing it'll come down that there would be like an ATProto normative, set of interfaces that all PDS things are expected to have. And then there's a series of sidecars that may or may not live alongside them, and might include things like email with like SMTP and IMAP and things like that. Those could be the kinds of things. Or they might be like lexicon bundles on the side. I don't know. Hand wavy if you're not getting the thing. I think what's definitely needed is a clear box that you can say, and ideally integration tests. And so you can test and say, like, this one is all green. It really, this PDS implementation checks all the boxes. It's a complete ATProto PDS. And then from there, other stuff is extra, it needs to be communicated.
And I think it will be cool to have a system for users to request a certain sidecar from their PDS host. That way it doesn't seem like, oh, if you want to use this feature, you have to join this centralized service that supports it.
I think the other thing that has come up, but that we haven't really dug into, is storage quotas, or even accepting or rejecting different lexicon types. So those are future. And I think the scope that we have to get to is right now, we think collectively for IndieSky that getting more people on independently hosted PDSs off of Blue Sky is a joint goal, right? There's 2,000-ish self-hosted, I'll use that phrase in this case, PDSs with like 1 to maybe 10 accounts at most. And then there's a few at the top of the list that are starting to have hundreds. I think the hundreds one is in fact a bot PDS for Atlanta that has like a bot per transit line or something like that the last time that I looked. And so we don't really have mass hosted PDSs quite yet. But that there's a lot of an intent that that's what we want to get to. So this is a segue into rather than just net new signups, is moving people off of Blue Sky PDSs. So there are some, Brian himself has written some great tools for migrating, great quotation marks if you're a developer like that likes SSHing into a machine, or remembers how to install Go on your machine. But there's at least 2 graphical migrators in development, one by the Spark team and one by the North Sky team. Yeah, we have a little bit of time. So, Roscoe, do you want to do a
I have a
live demo or just
Yeah,
talk
I
about
have that
this?
all set up right now. Yeah, basically Airport is a graphical PDS migrator. A graphical PDS migrator that essentially just makes PDS migration available to people who are scared of the command line or like have never used the command line, which is 99% of people. So essentially, you can only see my Safari window right now, right?
Yes.
Great. I believe it's migrating again. IndieSky.social. And then, okay, great. Interesting. My school Wi-Fi allows me to do Blue Sky domains now somehow. So I'll just migrate over to my personal PDS. And now
Everybody, PayPal Roscoe $5.
great. And then I just confirm that I want to migrate. I'll add more info that's like, this is in progress. Like, this is still in development. But yeah, you can access this right now at atpairport.com. So it creates the new account, verifies that it's created, migrates, verifies all the data's there. Oh, and this account does have like a few blobs and a lot of posts, just so it's like clear that that's a real, it like has real data on it. The Let me get the verification code. Sorry. And then this is where I could add another warning that's like last stop to get off. But yeah, now you just submit the token, it does the identity migration, and it finalizes
Puts
it.
your private key on screen, as is tradition
Yep.
for all live demos.
Yeah, and now I believe I can just go to Blue Sky, and if I search migrating again, you'll see it's .nop and .xyz now. And all the blobs are here, and all the posts are here. Yeah, so that's PDS migration, still very much in an in progress state, but it works. And I think it's like a big barrier
Woo!
Woo!
that can be
Super cool.
crossed.
That's great. Yeah, that looks super great, Roscoe.
And eventually, like also other actions like key retrieval and backup, which I believe you can already do in Blue Sky. I do wonder, is the file that Blue Sky gives you when you say download your data, is that a file that a PDS migrator could use to upload the repo?
Yeah, when you do that, it's almost a problem that gives you the car file, and it's great for importing into a new repo, not great for like casual users to unpack or do anything with. So there's definitely some funded work coming from IPFS Foundation to make it a little more accessible. I think Rudy got funded in particular to make a kind of like car UI for exploring that data.
Nice.
Car's just the data. It doesn't contain anything to help migrate the did doc or keys or anything.
No, that doesn't get migrated. So remember, the PLC directory has a did doc, which gets updated.
Yeah, I know. I was just saying, like, for the sake of, you could not just upload that into another, like a PDS importer that didn't have that one hadn't already migrated to, is what I mean.
Well, I mean, it's basically a data backup, right? And so the separation there, data backup versus the identity piece.
Awesome. Andra, I'm not asking you to do a live demo, but do you want to talk briefly about your North Sky migrator plans?
I'm absolutely not doing a live demo. Yeah, we're making progress on it. I have it functionally working. It absolutely does not look as nice as that last demo. Like, it's still probably ways on like that front. The one thing that we're kind of like a little bit blocked on in terms of what we're trying to work out best practices for at the moment is how to deal with recovery keys. We are really reticent to give users those like immediate, we know there's definitely a need to give users those, but we're also communicating to the user how important it is to keep that safe, because it's like if you lose it, it's not a problem. If you have access to like a friendly PDS, they can, you can have a new recovery key added. The bigger problem is if like a recovery key falls into somebody else's hands, is because then they basically have like unfettered access to your account. So we're kind of the idea that we're working with at the moment is thinking like, well, can we like add some kind of straightforward path to getting that recovery key as like a file inside of like a password manager or something like that. That way the sort of backup of that is kind of lifted by like a much more security focused kind of piece of infrastructure. So, but yeah, there's a number of password managers, and they all have much different sort of APIs for interacting with them, if you even really can. So we're still working out like what's the best way of doing that. It might just end up being like a bunch of really detailed instructions in text or something, like for the sake of simplicity. But that's kind of where we're blocked on, like at the moment with that. But
Yeah,
I see good progress with that the other day. So, sorry, go
that
ahead.
interface I just showed is not the final. Like I, that was actually a question I was going to ask. Like, how should we handle that? Should we show it to the user?
At the moment, I did a bit of work on this like the other night, and my current approach is I have it download as like a like basically application octet stream kind of like file to your hard drive. Saved with like a .key extension because I wasn't sure what else to use or what MIME type to use for that at any rate. But at least that way it's stored in sort of a like binary representation of that after it's been exported. I don't know if there's a better way of like handling that necessarily. I'm still experimenting with it, but
Many people in Keyland have banged their head against this in different ways. When I was doing this for Fission, we experimented with a couple of different things. One of which, and what 1Password does, is a PDF, um, or even things like a PDF where you actually store a QR code of the recovery key. There's a couple of different ways to do it. We've done some testing. Everything's impossible on Android, just so you know. So there's a whole like mobile use case and stuff like that, which is super fun. And modern versions of Mac OS and iOS, the downloads folder is automatically synced. But all of these are sort of like, I know that there's someone working on, actually has a PR into mainline BSky social app for doing recovery through the Blue Sky, so doing a key backup directly through the Blue Sky app on mobile. From what I've seen on that, that is super, 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 super smooth and, in my opinion, safe. This is a hard problem. And luckily in ATProto land, we can rotate keys. Yay.
Quick riff. That makes me wonder about specifying recovery accounts. I mean, like you can do that with emails, right? Gmail or whatever. Say that other account is another way to reach me, or somebody can vouch for me, basically, or sending keys to a safe place that way. Yeah.
Okay, we are at about an hour. Go ahead, Sebastian.
I thought this may be the right time to plug the one working group that we already
Please.
talked about, the one about Jörn already mentioned it, the one about moderation, commons moderation. Maybe I'll talk about that at the end when we're just chatting. But we have another one, the mobile PDS working group, and I'd love for everyone to join because Jörn and I were sketching up this idea of having a sort of a mobile PDS, which would more or less be an SDK that would handle all the key management in the secure enclave on the devices, and would work in conjunction with a mirror PDS, which could be commons infrastructure over here in Europe. And that way it would be like a single tenant PDS that would run on your mobile device, which would also sync the key material via iCloud keychain or the equivalent under Android. So if you're interested, please join the mobile SDK working group. And yeah, I think we talked in length about the commons moderation thing, where we have been following this approach for Europe, where we think if we set up commons infrastructure that could act as an incubator for indie developers, We think it needs to be at the PDS level because that's the common denominator for most developers. The app views differ in such a way that it's hard to do it there. Maybe as sort of a filter app view or something. Maybe we're talking about the same thing. If you strongly disagree with this, please join the working group and we can discuss it and find maybe a very good solution. Robin is also part of the working group, the Commons moderation framework thing. So yeah, I'd be happy to chat about this later.
That's great. Awesome. Yeah. So, I mean, I think really the thing is, we're doing lots of basic info sharing in a relatively large group, which eats up our time, but that's good. That's what we're here for. And splitting off into smaller groups that are more hyper focused is there. And then the other task is like, as you learn stuff, share it, post it to the wiki, get other people to try it, right? And then that's how we gather up more working knowledge over time. So we also the other thing that we have listed that I'd love to make some room for, but also kind of wrap up the main thing is I think Bailey, you're going to talk about online music communities.
You said me?
Was that you or who put in the notes?
Oh, I'm not sure who put it in the notes. I just
See, this mentions Mark Weidenbaum, but
Hilke,
Yeah,
was that you who
I wrote
posted
that,
about?
but I don't think it's the right time now to discuss again like specific community issues. Maybe we can postpone this to another meeting. But
Great.
if my mic is on now, I would like to say that I would like to join this moderation efforts it seems it was the idea that was born or what was mentioned in Hamburg already. It was named CARE, but I think it's basically the same idea to think about technical, yeah, like a relay basically with moderation capabilities, and then maybe from there going to find ways to explain it to regulators. This is how I think about this work group. I would like to join there.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we've got the Blue Sky API Touchers Discord, which is going to be renamed soon, probably to @Proto Touchers or something like that. Is hosting a working group section at the bottom, and I created ones for Sebastian this morning for mobile PDS and for the content moderation. So that's a place there. Sebastian also posted to the ATProto wiki, which is great. So we kind of have spaces for long form and for questions and other things like that, which is great. Are there any last things that we want to? So probably 2 weeks. I think Ted is going to take the lead on hosting the next one on trust and safety and moderation as a focus on that. I posted it already, but I'll actually just post again. There is a page where we're starting to collect, kind of in some ways, it's like PDS hacks, not totally the right word. Hosting and customization. So as an example, there's links on there to the Railway one-click template. This one right here. Feel free to put things in there, including questions. The other one in here that I'll highlight is something that our answers needed is people are asking is how do you customize the email that gets sent from your PDS? So that literally just has a section that goes and a link to the source code far away in NPM land that is not really connected to the packaged PDS Docker host stuff. That's the thing that where if you have active hacking time, someone's just gonna have to bushwhack around and try and figure out how to get that working at all and turning that back into. And the general API touchers has a short link here that I'll drop in there as well. Discord.ATProtocol.dev gets you into the API touchers. And the way Discord works, you may not see the working group channels. So you may need to look in the all groups that you can look at the bottom. Anything else we want for a final on the record? I will say, so we're still working on closing funding from basically paperwork with Free Our Feeds. And you can email community fund at protocol.community. That goes to Ted and myself and Nick. We'd be happy to help pay for servers, or if you need some paid time to hack on stuff like PDS email templates. That's the exact kind of thing that we want to support, and just to unblock people right away. Happy to have that discussion. Go ahead, Vincent.
Hello. Hi. Yes. We mostly have touched on everything that I came into this wanting to see, and a lot of stuff that I hadn't thought of, which is great. There is one thing that I'm curious about that I notice is mentioned in the notes about the possibility of remigrating back to the BlueSky PDS. Is that something that's just being like hypothetically suggested as if it happens, or is that something that we actually think is in the plans to be able to get people back onto the BlueSky PDS if they want to?
Brian?
It's just embarrassing. It's just like basically it locks the PDS up when you migrate back. And if you're on a smallish PDS, this isn't a big deal. Okay. We're just worried that it's like kind of an attack vector. And we have a branch that tries to fix it, but then that had some performance issues, and the person's on vacation that worked on it. So it's just kind of in limbo. But it's totally we're very aware that it's like a weirdly holding up the whole ecosystem. Like in some sense, it's like shouldn't like we're like, we did the important thing, you can leave us, and then it's like, oh, it actually, you need to be able to come back for it all to be. It was like a like a second level thing, but like the signal is very clear that that's the thing that's holding a lot of people back. So it is like a priority for
Vincent, we've got a whole group of PDS hosters. We've got graphical tools. We'll just keep migrating in like a grand circle.
Yeah.
And by the time you complete it, BlueSky will be happy to welcome you back.
Like migratory birds, they'll spend the summer on a different PDS and then winter back at BlueSky.
Well, once you leave the terminal, you can't get back in unless you go back to security.
Right. Yes. Okay. Thank you. That's it is probably a question for pretty far in the future, at least for us. So not intending to put any kind of like strong pressure on anybody, but it's a thing that I was thinking about.
Oh no, that's in fact what we're here for.
Okay, cool, fine. Then yes, strong pressure. We need it right now.
I'm not asking Brian for a PLC spin out update because his board member told me that he'd give me updates. This is absolute, and I really appreciate Brian, you being here to share knowledge. Obviously,
yeah, of course. I'll acknowledge we've kind of missed the boat on the PDS migration back, right? Like the moment to have fixed that and like moved the needle, like that's probably past. Like we're still gonna do it, but
Cool. To be clear, it's definitely not past. Please do it.
Roscoe, go ahead.
Thanks. I was just gonna add, if anyone wants to see like all the steps to migrate, Airport is open source, and I'll put the link in the chat and in the meeting notes.
Great.
And I'm planning on making a JavaScript library, so like other tools can implement like key retrieval and migration if they want to.
Roscoe, what stage is this at? Do you want us to share it with other people? Do you want people to try it out? How can people help?
I'll probably like make a tweet on BlueSky in like the next day or two once I get like more warning screens before it reveals the PLC key. And then like I'll make it like a secure file as Andrea was talking about. But yeah, relatively soon. I mean, you don't have to be super hush hush, but like, yeah, it's not like a secret.
Well, okay, here's the deal. Do you want people, like, should people set up PDSs and start asking people to migrate over, right? That's not a thing that you want yet.
I mean, if people want to do it for their own PDSs, like that's fine for me. Like it'll be like
Okay.
either today or tomorrow that I like
Cool.
make a big thing about it.
Okay.
We'll let you take the lead and boost you when you do. So happy to do that. Zach, hello, my friend.
Aloha. I just wanted to throw out there real quick as a topic for something future to consider. When does PDS stand for private data store? I'm very interested in the applications of using something at an infrastructure level for identity wallet, like cell phone identity wallet type applications, and fine-grained access control rights on very private information. So I see this as potentially that infrastructure that can fill in that role, as well as being a general open forum type.
Yeah, absolutely. Brian mentioned private state. OAuth scopes is a piece of it. And then we think the end-to-end messaging group, working group is actually pretty far along in that there's kind of like an initial spec to KitKat, slightly different thing than PDSs. Like it really is a different component layer. Yes, a lot of people would like privately, and I think the big split really just is um, some people feel very strongly that they want to hold the keys where everything is end-to-end encrypted. And others see a model that looks more like a classic app where you already kind of trust your PDS host, and it is private in the sense that people don't access that. And I know literally there was something flowing back and forth today of people saying, "Oh, what does ciphertext look like if it flows around even on today's model?" Which, you know, I don't think we have any progress, but it's an area where we need experiments. Oh, I'd say one more piece that is emerging is people building local first applications that are private and encrypted. And so this works in a today model, where you then publish to your PDS when you're ready to make it public, basically. Slightly different model, but I think there will be some people at Local First Conf in Berlin coming up next week that are going to be working on some of these things. Yeah. Awesome. I think anything else before we go off the record? Okay. Thank you all for joining us. We'll feel free to put more notes in there. We'll copy them into the wiki for long-term storage, including the chat, because the chat has super valuable discussion and links. Yeah, Enrico, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, this is something I was thinking. I think it kind of makes sense. So I really would like to put this on record if you don't mind. So I was thinking if you have an influencer that is going to have 10K subscribers, 10K viewers each time to their feeds, and they are to their video feeds, and they are selling external products, so they are monetizing their feed. Would that make sense to charge the traffic quota to the app view owner, which is from what I understood is going to pay for the CDN hosting services right now? Or should we push, as a general protocol idea, the ownership of CDN towards the PDS side? For example, as a PDS hosting service, I could say that I'd sell you a PDS hosting space for a certain amount of money per month, and that includes the ability to stream your content to 10,000 or 100,000 of people and things like that.
Yeah, I think that ultimately comes down to you're describing an app at the end of the day. right? So you're saying you're an app view that includes a PDS. I don't think like the PDS is designed to, it mostly shouldn't be connected directly. And so you again have to do moderation and everything else like that at that app view concern. So the CDN is more likely to be bundled with the app view, and the PDS is currently designed to be more like raw storage.
Yeah. I think that there's a bunch of things to discuss there around where is value captured and how that stuff's hosted that we should talk about further. And like, let's do it in the off the record section here, because there's a variety of concerns that ties into that I think are good, because we should be talking about who bears the costs of what thing, right? And whose responsibility is what.
Exactly. So anyone, we're gonna stop recording, and if you're all welcome to stay for the off the record where we can keep chatting. Thank you everyone for joining us.
Thanks.